Hey guys, it's Corey. No one person can change the world, but leaders everywhere can.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Rippled Radio. Jess, this is a big week for you.
It is a big week.
I feel like we need to tell our listeners a little bit about your life right now. What did you do on Tuesday night this week?
I picked out my wedding dress.
I think there's a different phrase you're supposed to use.
Oh,
when you
I
say
said
that.
yes to the dress.
Yes.
Is what you're supposed to say.
You're supposed to say I said yes to the dress. So Jess is getting married May 25th of this year. We'll now have to do some updates along the way because this is so fun. Is the dress, so give some advice right now to all the future people getting married. Did you pick out the dress you thought you would be wearing?
No, I did not. I actually found the dress that I thought I would always want, but I'm glad that I had 8 people in the room to tell me otherwise. And I tried on, I think, probably every style, right?
Yes.
Which I feel like it was really good because I learned a lot about dresses. I had no idea all the necklines, the fits, the beads, the materials.
And you refer to them as she.
She.
The girl, they're girls.
Oh,
the
yes,
dresses.
they have names.
They have names,
yes.
And we don't call the dress it. Like
No.
these people, it was like shook me for a second.
This is her.
This is her. Now we love her because, and she's special because I was like, oh, so I learned a whole new language.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
So how many days till the wedding?
Oh gosh, Josh keeps telling me, and I don't remember. 100 something.
100 something.
150 maybe.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Very exciting. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
Beautiful. Speaking of big things, I'm so excited we have Jennifer McClure on as a guest today. I feel like when we started talking about the concept for Rippled Radio, she was one of the first people we said is a Rippler. And there's a few reasons why. I've shared before that Disrupt HR, I feel like, was a pivotal part of my personal journey. And Jennifer is the co-founder of Disrupt HR. So when we reached out to her to invite her to be on the podcast, I felt like we were reaching out to a celebrity. And I couldn't believe when she replied. I think I ran all over our office and was like, Jennifer McClure replied to my email. And some people were like, who? But I know what a big deal she is. And so we spent a lot of time talking. So it's funny. Jennifer actually gave me a piece of advice because she's a podcaster. And she said, don't make your episodes too long. And then she and I proceeded to talk for an hour, right? So I'm going to take a lot of her advice, but on this one, we didn't shorten it because it was an organic conversation. And I think part of what's amazing about her, you get from listening to this episode. So if it's long and you divide it up into 2, cool. But I'm going to try to give you 3 things to listen to, or listen for. I mean, when you're listening to her, because I think she's such a unique individual. So first, I want to tell everybody that's listening what Disrupt HR is. I think I keep talking about it, and I don't know if I've said what it is. Disrupt HR is kind of like a TED Talk for HR professionals. So that video thing, and we're used to seeing clips on YouTube of these people doing TED Talks. Disrupt HR is like a TED Talk version dedicated to HR topics that are designed to really challenge the norms in HR. The concept for this was thought of by Jennifer. And when you listen to her story, the 3 things I want you to listen for are, number 1, her motivation. When we think about who is a Rippler, her motivation is so pure. She wanted to give a voice to HR professionals that had these great ideas and no platform to share them on. If that's not selfless, I don't know what is. The second thing I want you to listen for that makes her a Rippler is her humility. When she tells her story and her challenging spots and like things that went wrong and feedback that she got where people were like, you are not where you think you are. And she just kind of laughs about it. She's sort of self-deprecating. And I just think that that's charming and flies in the face of what we usually think of someone as powerful. And then the third thing is her resilience and agility in those moments. We're posting a lot of content right now on failure, how to overcome it through being resilient, agility, and the ability to pivot through that. She's done that so many times in her career, and all in the face, or all in the purpose of giving people a platform to become great versions of themselves. So she truly is a rippler who's giving other ripplers a platform, which is just like next level rippling, if there is such a thing. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you can really sort of take everything about her in. And I want to say a couple things to different types of listeners. Business owners that are listening, share Disrupt HR content with your HR team. The videos on there will give different ideas to them about ways they can impact your people practices. And they come from someone who's now coaching executives all over the country and has impacted the lives of so many HR professionals. So it's a free resource for best practice sharing. HR professionals, listen to, again, what she has to say about how she navigated her career and the different ways that happens, because HR professionals are coaching people through career planning all the time. And anyone who's looking to develop their leadership and looking for different styles of leadership, she's got such a compelling way about her. Again, she's not in your face. She's very humble. She's unassuming, and yet she's accomplished so much. Disrupt HR has hundreds of chapters all over the world, thousands and thousands of videos that are influencing people everywhere. And she is just sweet and kind and smart and unassuming. And I think it's great to see, different styles of leadership that way. So we'll transition over, and I'm excited to introduce all of you Ripplers to one of the ultimates, Jennifer McClure. So Jennifer, welcome. And at the risk of fangirling a little bit, I am so happy that you agreed to do this interview with us.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's great to talk to you in person. I know we've had a pre-call, but every chance I get to talk to you, I am inspired and left with a smile on my face. So I'm excited to chat with you today.
I'm so glad. I have to share with everybody sort of the path of us coming together, because I had the opportunity last year to be part of Disrupt HR here in Rochester. And I did my talk. It was an incredible experience. And then you in your newsletter mentioned me. Mm-hmm. And I felt like Jimmy Fallon talked about me. Like, it just was the biggest compliment. So I sent you a message on LinkedIn and said, thank you so much. I loved the experience. And when we decided to start this podcast, I immediately thought, I have to ask if she would even consider joining us. And I jumped out of my chair when you responded yes, because you're just a really critical part of the journey. So hearing from you today is going to be really cool.
Oh, well, again, I loved your talk, and hopefully you'll share it in the show notes again for people who may not have seen it. It was really good and unique, and I loved it.
Good, good. Well, let's talk about kind of the earlier days of you. You started Disrupt HR, which we're going to spend some time talking about. But if we can rewind the clock, before you became who you are now, what have you been up to?
I suppose I've always been who I am now.
Or I should say, what had you been up to?
I am just more vintage now. I grew up on a farm in Tennessee, so I'm sure that informs a lot of who I am and what I do, and my love for animals and horses and all that. In a relatively small town, but the high school I went to was the largest high school in the state. So, I think, again, more dynamics that probably at play. And when I went to college, like most people that are, even today in their early 20s or late teens, had no idea what I wanted to do, based off of looking at the people in my community at the time, the time where most women didn't work, or many women didn't work, and moms stayed home with their kids. I probably thought some version of that was going to be my future. So when
it's so crazy to realize how recent in history we still had that assumption about ourselves.
Well, again, who are your role models? Who are you going to look to say, social media wasn't a thing. We had 3 channels on black and white TV that you actually had to get up and walk across the room to change the channel. Kids. So yes, decades ago, but I didn't have anybody to say, "Oh, someday I'd like to be, a senator or a CEO or whatever." But when my college advisor asked me in my junior year, he said, "It's time for you to pick a major. You've been here a while." um, and I still, it would have been great if I had been a journaler or a diary person back then so that I could look back and maybe see some insights. But when I was asked that question, I have no idea where the answer came from because I said, well, how about personnel management, which was what HR was called at the time.
I
I had never
know personnel
had
management.
never met someone who worked in personnel, didn't know anybody who worked in personnel. I had had one job at a country grocery store where the store manager hired me. So my thoughts on why I said personnel management was I always say I was a millennial before millennials were a thing. I did have aspirations to be the leader, to be the top dog, even though my mom and my dad both were good examples to follow, and my brother as well. But I thought, well, where in a company could I work that I could have the most influence and impact? I want to
Mm.
have responsibility for as many people as possible. No way I want to start at the bottom as a worker bee and work my way up.
So, can I
So,
ask you a question about that though?
yeah,
Why did you want that? Because
I don't
you
know.
are not I mean, in all the years we've known each other, right? But you immediately are disarmingly humble. You weren't driving for that because of some ego or control wish. Like, why did you want that impact?
I think again, there are many sides to all of us, and with maturity and wisdom comes maybe some dampening of our initial thoughts. I think young Jennifer and even old Jennifer can get very competitive. Any assessment you put in front of me, I've joked about it for years. Any assessment that you put in front of me, if there's a D word that is associated with that, dominant, directive, dumb, not dumb, but
Not dumb.
dominant, directive, any of those, like this person can be too annoying because they're talking over everybody. They're the one that thinks their ideas are best. They want to be in charge. That is me. The good news is that Jennifer also, like many people, got a lot of scrapes and bruises from being that
Mhm.
way. So thankfully, I did learn. I also learned, having taken many assessments over the years, that those are really okay. So you're a high D and pretty much nothing else on the disc.
Right.
MBTI, I don't even remember. I've taken that a few times. A lot of people, I'm a coach as well, executive coach, and if you give someone an assessment like that and they get their report back, and like mine comes back and says, again, I talk over people in meetings, and I have a tendency to put my ideas out and not listen to others. What that means is that I need to be aware of that and I need to guard against it. So
The
yes,
self-awareness,
yes.
impact. It's amazing because it's worked for you. Because ironically, later in your career, your whole purpose is giving a platform to other people in their voice. So it's really ironic that that was your feedback early on.
Yeah, again, it's learned behavior where,
Mhm.
if I am in a meeting, I am desperate to put my ideas on the table. But it's learned behavior to say there are five people in this room. Two of them haven't spoken yet. Let's make sure they get their ideas on the table before I start telling everybody what I think we should do. First of all, I might learn something. Second of all, I want to make sure that I do hear what their concerns or their thoughts or their issues might be. So it's learned behavior. Am I always great at it? Again, I could point to many examples where even today I fail because I'm in charge. Listen to me.
It's so
But
funny to hear you say that.
but again, now I'm 15 years into being my own boss and running my
Mhm.
own business. So I don't have anybody to fuss with. All my ideas they're the only ideas. I have a business partner for Disrupt HR. We live in the same community, but we haven't seen each other in person since before the pandemic. He's very much a silent business partner. He helped get the idea off the ground and still is very supportive, but I don't have to ask him what to do. So, you know, here I am again, almost 4 decades into being who I am in the work world. And I can say it's tiring.
Yeah.
I'd like some people to disagree with me
Yeah.
sometimes.
Can
I'd
can
like
it
to have
not be
some
my
other
decision for
people.
once?
Yeah, I'd like to have some other people to go, you take that on. Go ahead. But at the same time, it does fit in a way with my wiring. If I think my ideas are the best, and I want to do my idea, then being your own boss is a great way to make that happen. But again, you still get your knees bumped and scraped a lot because your ideas aren't always the best, but nobody was there to help you test them out if you don't have a good sounding board or kind of a personal board of directors to help you.
Well, and I think bossiness is sometimes bravery in disguise. You had ideas and you had the wherewithal to go try them. And a lot of people are held back by their own fear. And so they don't listen to themselves. They don't try those things. So if you think of weaknesses or strengths overused, then your bravery got a little bossy sometimes and you've learned how to reel that in a little.
Fun fact, about 2 or 3 years into my career. So, back to chose the major in personnel, eventually talked my way into a job as starting up an HR department in a small manufacturing company where my job title was personnel manager / shipping and receiving manager. So they're
Where
like,
all great careers begin.
they're like, this personnel job is new and that's not enough. So take on shipping and receiving, person who's never been in a manufacturing plant before in your life. But I loved it. I loved the challenge and the opportunity to do that. But I was the youngest person. It was a small company, but I was the youngest person in the whole company. I was the only woman on the leadership team. And so looking back, I have a lot of compassion for that, Jennifer, because she was trying to get everybody to listen to her. She had ideas and not a lot of people were paying attention. So probably 2 or 3 years into that job, I was given the feedback that I could be a better communicator, that I tended to talk over people, and steamroll was the word I remember. So they sent me to a 2-week in-person communications training class. Who knows what I learned in that class, but I remember very vividly there was an exercise. We've probably all done some version of the team building exercise where you're at a table with 7 or 8 people and they read out this exercise. You're on a plane, it crashes in the Arctic. You have a bottle of alcohol, you have a bandage, there's a
That kind of alcohol.
Yeah, there's a scrub tree nearby and a frozen river. What do you do? And I don't remember again. I remember the bottle of alcohol, the scrub tree, and the frozen river. My team, all of them men, by the way, again, and I'm sure I was the youngest person at the table, all wanted to cut the scrub tree down and build a raft to go down the frozen river. And I was adamant, we have to stay with the plane. At the end, At the end, I got outvoted. So our answer to the problem was, build a raft and push it down the frozen river, I guess, which was, of course, the wrong answer. The correct answer was to stay at the plane.
Right.
And I'll never forget one of the people at the table when the instructor shared the correct answer. He turned around and he looked at me and he goes, "Well, you were right, but you were an asshole about it." And I'm like, "Well, let me guess why you're at communications training, sir."
We could just stay on this for hours.
But again, Jennifer learned from that experience.
Yes.
I was right. My ideas needed to be heard, but how I communicated them were incorrect. I can do better.
Well, and you overcorrect. Like you're told you're too much, so you lessen and you overcorrect, and then you find your middle.
Yep.
And it's great to hear this because I think it's easy to assume people that have a lot of success in one field were born that way. But you hear stories about like supermodels, right? And you see their middle school picture and they were awkward and gawky. Or like Josh Allen didn't get recruited in college at all. And you were told you were bossy and had communication problems, and now you're an executive coach.
Well, again, I think that hopefully that's encouragement for both new and young leaders as well as seasoned leaders that you will fail, you will get feedback. What's important is what you do with that feedback. So again, hopefully 75% of the time I correct for my natural tendencies, which are to be boss and to tell people what to do and to listen to me. And then 25% of the time, depending on the situation, again, maybe it's lessened because I work for myself now. I don't have anybody to inflict all that on usually, but I still fail. And it's always good to both remind myself and sometimes to be reminded kindly and gently, hopefully by other people, that I could maybe approach things a different way.
You exemplify so many things about great leadership in those stories. I think about great leaders can be self deprecating, they can poke fun at themselves. And I also think you kind of know who you are and it's not going to change. So I give the advice a lot. Like if you know you're kind of bossy or you're disorganized, me,
Yeah.
if you can tell your team, look, I know I can be like this and I'm going to try my best to not let it negatively impact you. But if it does, let me know and I'll
Yeah.
work on it. And humility, the ability to receive feedback, and the willingness to be wrong. You
Mhm.
don't have an issue being wrong.
Oh, I don't want to be wrong, but I am.
Right. You can't avoid it. And so you have to react and respond and pivot and move on. So you started to get better at communicating. I imagine you got promoted out of shipping and receiving.
Eventually, yes, we actually redoubled the company in size and things were happening. So the HR job became enough for one person. And
Hmm.
so I hired somebody to be the shipping and receiving manager who, when I left the company to move to Cincinnati, replaced me as the human resources manager because he was a good people manager and a good people
Mm.
person. So maybe a little bit of, again, leadership there as well with both identifying talent and helping to help him learn and develop into something new that he could grow into.
So, how far into your leadership career working for someone else did you start to think, wait, maybe there's some things I want to do on my own outside of the structure? Like, what created that moment? And how did you get the confidence to start really saying, I'm going to go that road?
Yeah. I think about 10 years into my HR career, I was at a Japanese automotive company as the HR manager. Um, And I did all the annual trainings and things like that, stood up in front of people and talked all the time. Just that was just part of the job. And one time we had to do annual union avoidance training, as a
Mm,
Japanese automotive company,
riveting.
we to maintain non-union status. Yes. When you think of riveting training, there's like sexual harassment training and then union
Union.
avoidance probably above that. So I got tired of doing it. It was back in the days of slide transparencies. You pull the folder out of the desk, put the slides up, and everybody's like, we hate this. And I thought, I hate it too. And so I'm going to bring somebody else in to do it this year who, will just be fresh, or maybe people won't hate it as much. And he was amazing. He was in his 70s. He was a consultant we used to do our engagement surveys. He had retired from General Motors, so he had tons of, like, 40 years of experience in dealing with unions and what worked and what didn't work. And so he stood up there and he told stories and he had people laughing and they were loving the training. And I was sitting on the back row going, I was loving it too. And I'm like, I want to do what he's doing someday.
Mm,
I want to teach people. I want to engage people. I want to tell stories that help people to, change their behavior or to believe that they can do something. But I said to myself, again, back in that back row, I don't have enough stories yet like he does. A lot of what he's doing is sharing stories that makes the points relevant and relatable. And so maybe 20 years into my career, I can think about being a speaker or trainer.
hmm.
And I'm sure I probably forgot all about that. And then about 18 and a half years in, a new company now with a company that was about to go bankrupt. And I came on as part of a new executive team who my responsibility was help turn the company around culturally. It had been heavily unionized. And it had been non-union for 16 years, but the VP of HR at the time his title was still VP of Industrial Relations. He'd been there 28 years. So his mindset was still very much us, them. The new CEO coming in was like, I want to create a team atmosphere. We've got to turn this company around financially. It's about to go bankrupt. We can't do that if the employees feel like they're, working against us. So he hired me, coming from that kind of Japanese culture mindset, team-based work systems, all that, to be
Yes.
part of that, and to turn the company around so that the company could be sold. It was privately held, to hopefully the right buyers who would steward a very iconic brand in Cincinnati, into the future. And we did that and did it successfully. And it was a heavy lift. I was there for almost 4 years. We sold the company after 2.5. I should have left then. I offered to leave then. I was asked to stay to help the new CEO. That was a mistake.
Mm.
Should have gone because I did what I came there to do. But the new CEO and I, who we were, coworkers, teammates, he had been the COO before. We knew we were very different from each other, but we thought we could make it work. And I did my best not to make it work. Again, lessons learned. And I shared this
I
story
love
recently.
that
Well, I
though.
shared this story recently in a training class that I was giving to some HR people, and the feedback that I got from the person afterwards, like, I cannot believe you shared that story of you getting fired. Um, that really took away from your credibility. I'm like, I think,
What?
well, but in the context that I shared it, I don't know that it was necessary to share, but I'll share it here. So if you can think it takes away from my credibility,
Listen, I've been
well,
fired before too, so I'm with you. Best thing that ever happened to me.
good people get fired. The best thing that ever happened to me because
Yes.
I needed that wake up call because again, arrogant Jennifer maybe had come back to the forefront. I made my CEO friend, he was my friend. I made his life miserable for a year, just resisting everything he did because I was so unhappy personally with the role because it had changed under the new ownership.
Hmm.
And, eventually he, had to let me go and said, I don't want to do this, but I feel like you made me do it. And I again, thankfully, driving home, you're embarrassed. You
Hmm.
knew it was coming, but you didn't do anything to plan for it, or at least I didn't. But driving home, I was like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me because I would never have left on my own because I was too comfortable
I
financially and otherwise.
I feel like we
And
were supposed to meet and become friends. I felt the same way. I would have never left that job.
I think that realization changed the course of my life because I probably, if I had left a year earlier, I would have just taken another corporate HR job
Mm.
because to your earlier question, when did I say I wanted to go out on my own? I did it, but I knew that I was burnt out. I knew that the idea of going into another HR job right now when I was, in that state was not appealing. So, like many an executive who gets fired, let go, laid off, or otherwise unemployed, you go, I'll start my own business.
And look
And
at you now.
well, no, there was a learning opportunity in there. So I took a couple months off. I spent money like crazy because I'm like, I got severance. I'm going to get another job. I'll just, live it up. And then a couple months into that, I realized that was a dumb plan. But I engaged a coach. My thoughts were I had outplacement in my contract, and I called my CEO friend of me, who is now certainly a friend again. And I said, I don't want the outplacement. They do a fine job, but I want a coach, which will be cheaper. And he's like, whatever, whatever. Just do you, Jennifer. So I engaged a coach. My thoughts were is that he would just confirm that I was the most amazing unemployed HR person ever, and that I absolutely should be starting my own business. And he said, nope, you got to put together a resume and a marketing plan, and then you're not going to go out and look for a job. What your role for like the next month or two while we work together is I want you out there talking to people to find out where they think that you could best fit. What are your options? You're thinking you want to start your own business, so you can certainly talk to people who started their own business. You have a lot of HR experience, so you should talk to people who are in HR. That still may be an option for you. And then he said, I like for you to have three. You've done a lot of recruiting, so talk to people about the possibility of recruiting. So I very reluctantly, a very introverted, never had been really outside the four walls, didn't know what relationship building outside my organizations was like. I had to start on the remedial plan. He had to give me three names of people who were former clients and one who was the owner of a recruiting firm where he had an office. Um, and I was supposed to just go and talk to people. So again, I think there's magic in that for people who maybe are either in career transition or will be at some point. I got so much mileage out of those conversations because when I asked to meet with people, it wasn't, hey, I'm unemployed. I'm going to shove my resume in your face. Can you help me get a job? It was, all about them. If I asked for 30 minutes, then for 20 minutes, I got questions. You started your own business. How did that work out? What was the first step that you took? You made the transition from corporate into this. Or if you're a leader in a company, tell me about, what you're working on as a company. Because I am very curious.
Mm.
People, well, I'm introverted in the sense that I resist making that first contact. But once I start talking to you, like, as you can see, I don't shut up. So,
No,
so,
but you,
so many people gave me just nuggets of wisdom, both about starting their own business and the
mm,
fact that if you want to start your own business, you should really probably be doing it as a side hustle in some way first.
mhm.
Don't just start cold. That's very hard. But almost all of them, and I wish I'd kept my spreadsheet, but I know I talked to over a couple of months, dozens and dozens of leaders who were very kind and all met with me except for one person in person, and she was actually super helpful over the phone.
Mm.
They all said the same thing. When I get to that last 5 minutes, I'm like, well, I'm currently in transition. My role of, has been a leader and executive in HR for almost 20 years. I'm considering what's next. I'm thinking about starting my own business. That was, what I would typically lead with. All of them said, not one person said different. They all said, girl, you're not ready. Don't,
Why?
because you, by your own admission, this is the first time you've really been out doing any networking or building relationships. Second of all, in the conversation that we've had, you don't know what you would sell. If you just said Jennifer McClure Inc. is open for business, okay, you think you're going to do HR consulting maybe, but what is that? How are you going to differentiate yourself from other people? All things that I had not thought one iota about. I was just like, I'll hang a shingle. I'm awesome. People will work with me. And so again, many of them, but they all said, don't start your own business yet. Not saying never, just not yet.
Did you do it
You're
right
not
then
ready.
anyway?
No.
No.
They, a lot of them gave me good advice. They said, go to work somewhere, either in a consulting firm, or, you have a lot of recruiting in your background. It would probably be a natural transition for you to go into recruiting where you can learn from someone else what it takes to develop business. You'll get more
Mm.
clarity on what you want to do if and when you start your own business, and you'll see yourself. It's a different world, obviously, to be out where you have to hunt and kill your own food rather than that check shows up as a direct deposit every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, regardless of what you do. And so, as I said, the coach I was working with, he had an office in a small family-owned recruiting firm here in Cincinnati. And a lot of people knew him and respected him that I spoke with and said, you should go talk to Mike Sipple Sr. about maybe becoming an executive recruiter and learning from him, because you don't want to be the transactional recruiter type. Because I was like, I hate recruiters. They just call, they don't know what you want. They just try to fill square pegs and round holes. And they're like, well, what if you worked with a recruiting firm that didn't do
Didn't
that?
do that.
That was more focused on relationships, really making the right matches with companies and candidates. And Centennial Inc., where the Sipples are, is a firm that does that. So Mike Sr. was willing to give me a shot. And him and his son, who, was way younger than me at the time, but I learned just as much from
He
him as
probably
I did.
still is younger than you.
He is way younger than me still. Now he's the CEO of the firm. I learned so much from both of them about relationship building to develop business, to be a trusted advisor, um, to really understand that, especially in executive search, when you're selling a 30% fee, much of which they pay
Mm.
up front, that is all about trust, both in your process, but in your skills. And so to get people to fork over that cash requires a lot more than just picking up the phone and calling. It's a longer sell, which, now that I am in business for myself, that is how I get my business today. And it's from relationships, it's
Mhm.
from brand building, it's from, building trust in the community, et cetera. So I did that for about 4 years as an executive search consultant. And during that time, because so many people had been so helpful to me during my transition, I had heard a gentleman at an executive meeting who was a CEO who had recently gotten a job after being out of work for 14 months. And he said he met so many people while he was in transition, he decided when he did get employed, he was going to give away 10% of his time as a tithe back to the community, to help people in transition, just like he had been helped. So that resonated with me. So when I became an executive recruiter, I decided to give away 10% of my time, which, if you know many executive recruiters, they don't do that. But if I focused on senior executives in transition, since those were typically also the people that I would either hire me or could be candidates, maybe. But even if they weren't, if they called me and they said, "Can you look at my resume? Can I, I'm not getting selected. I'm always the second candidate.
Mm.
What I'm doing wrong," I'll be like, "Come in, let's talk for an hour." And so sometimes I'd share my introverted networking story. I'd share, for those who I could, it's people are so transparent and they don't realize it, especially executives. They'd be sitting across from me and they are clearly trying to cover up that they've been fired, or, they're saying things like, "We agreed to part way," whatever everybody
Mutual
says.
decision.
And I'd be like, "Okay, this is a safe space. I'm not here to hire you. Tell me what really happened." And when they told me, they had their own firing stories, then I'd share mine, because mine actually turned out well. Again, because I realized that I was the problem. I apologized to my CEO. He eventually became my biggest client at the recruiting firm, and he's been my biggest client in my business today. So
It's
because I recognized my failure, that was repaired.
it's also neat your way of storytelling because again, people think they can only share their successes to be admired and followed. But
Yeah,
success is not as relatable as moments of failure.
right.
And so you sharing that, I can only imagine how many people are encouraged because you're going to go through those moments and it still means success will follow if you keep
But
going.
it's helpful to have somebody to talk to, whether you
Mhm.
do engage a coach or you do have some, because some people's stories didn't have the happy ending that mine
Mm.
did. I had all the revelations that I was the problem. I apologize. We're on good terms now. Yay. Some people failed really badly, and so I always told them, we have to find a way to tell the truth, but drive the train in a positive direction.
Mm.
So when you share that you got fired because you did this or that, or it comes up, maybe you don't lead with that. And again, a lot of people do that too. Like, "Hey, I got fired, but I wasn't the problem. So let's keep talking. I'm great for your job." um, Having somebody to work through that with was really helpful, I think, to a lot of people, and maybe a few of them didn't listen. But when those people either went back to, job search encouragement groups or other professional organizations they were part of, or when they did get hired in companies, and again, many of the ones that I was meeting with in transition were C-level people, they would say, "Hey, Jennifer, can you come in and talk to my leadership team about the importance of building relationships?" Or this was 2006, 7, 8. LinkedIn was relatively new. So I would turn around my computer and show them how to create a LinkedIn profile and talk to them about the importance of building their network. Um, can you come in and teach my recruiting team or my HR team how to use LinkedIn? And so remember, 10 years or so earlier, I had said someday I'd like to be a speaker or trainer. Um, and so I started doing that, not because I pursued it, but because I was just being asked to teach what I
Mhm.
know, which is what I think any good speaker, the gentleman that was in his 70s that was telling all the great stories was teaching what he knew.
Yeah.
So after a while, I'm like, I am doing what I thought I wanted to be doing about 20 years into my career. I do have stories that resonate with people. I like seeing the change in their eyes and in their minds when they realize, okay, I did get fired, but I can overcome this. Or I want to try something new and pursue a different direction. If I, work with the right people, make sure I'm getting good advice, listening and learning to other people, I can pursue a different career path. Um, LinkedIn is important for building a personal brand, and that matters. So probably about a year and a half of just kind of doing one-off speaking here and there. And it was, I was 100% commission as a retained search recruiter. So after a while, I started, instead of the hug and a mug for coming to speak to our group, it was, I'll charge $500, which cut down on some of the requests, which is what I needed, but also
Yes.
showed me that I could make a living maybe doing this. So in 2010, with the blessing of the recruiting firm owner, who, he certainly supported me being out speaking. It was not only building my brand, but building the brand of the firm as well. I said, "I think I'm ready to step out and be a full-time professional speaker." And he said, "I'm here to help you. I will always be your biggest fan." And he has been, and I'm grateful for that.
So would Jennifer now tell Jennifer then, do it just like you did it? Or would you have told her sooner, you've got this, jump, charge for it? Or do you think you needed all of that to get where you are?
I think I needed all that. The Jennifer who, with more wisdom 15 years later, would say, go ahead and do it, wouldn't have, again, some of the stories that helped propelled the business, wouldn't have the relationships that still are some clients today, and were many of my first clients when I did start my own business, because I helped them or because I taught them something. She wouldn't have the brand. She wouldn't have been trying to figure out how to become a retained search recruiter with no training or whatever. So I turned to blogs, which were, maybe those that remember the heyday of blogging back in like 2007, 8, 9. I turned to blogs and I started building relationships with some of those HR and recruiting bloggers. I found ERE.net. I found, SHRM, which I had known about. I found resources that then, and people. My best friend today is a anonymous blogger that I started following her blog in 2008.
She's not anonymous to you, though. You know who she is.
Well, she eventually became not. She's Laurie Rudiman. She's not anonymous to anybody, but she was her blog I started following was called Team Building is for Suckers, and then it became Punk Rock HR, and now she has a very popular podcast called Punk Rock HR, and she's become wildly popular. But Jennifer, if she had just jumped, would have had none of that, because she would have thought, similar to what I did when I did start my own business, that I knew everything and I didn't need anyone's help. Smarter Jennifer would tell, hey, do what you did, but then when you decide in 2010 to start your own business, again, don't just turn the light on and say open for business. Work with SCORE, or SCORE, retired executives, et cetera. Work with organizations who can help you figure out what you need to do to start your own business, rather than just saying, okay, I'm making the leap. Because my first year in business, yes, I had some speaking gigs lined up, paying speaking gigs. I had a brand that was starting to be pretty strong in the HR recruiting space online. There was a lot of benefit to being member number 5 million something on LinkedIn, a lot of benefit to joining Twitter back in the day when Twitter was a great thing, in the first year that it was open. So being first out there and those things helped me to build a brand that helped me to develop a lot of business. But my first year in business, 2010, I made $12,000. That is 100% a factor of me having no idea what I was doing and not seeking any resources to support me. So, again, for anybody who's thinking about making that leap, yes, maybe transition phase might be good for you too. Again, everybody that had started their own business told me they were doing some version of it, on the side or for free, before they started their own business. So I think that's always good advice. But get help. Don't try to do it on your own. It is not true that you can just change your title on your LinkedIn profile and say President and CEO of Jennifer McClure Inc. And people go, oh, wow, I've always wanted to hire you for something.
So you said a few minutes ago you wanted to tithe time back. You wanted to give back.
Yeah.
Did that have anything to do with you starting Disrupt HR? That desire to give back, or was it separate?
I'd say it was separate. I mean, I
Okay.
think that maybe is inherent to who I am. I certainly want to, if you ask me what my why is, what I do as a professional speaker, I want to help you to grow and to have impact and to thrive in the future of work, so that comes from a service mindset as well. But Disrupt HR really started because I was about 3 years into my business as a professional speaker, still doing a lot of paying my own way to speak at events, speaking for free, just again, trying to build that brand, was starting to be in a position, I think, to, about 3 years in my speaking business, I stopped accepting the free speaking things and started saying more that I'm focusing on keynotes, etc. But I'd been out on the road and in the conferences and the communities and the corporate events, and was just having a conversation with the gentleman who is my business partner that I haven't seen in forever today. He had founded an HR tech company and was young, and again, being smart, he showed up at the local HR association meeting where I was there networking as a recruiter at the time, just, being present and building relationships. And I saw that nobody was really talking to him because he was a vendor. So I
Yes.
went over and talked to him, and he was like, wow, somebody who actually paid attention to me. And he said, would you mind, joining my board of
Poor
advisors?
vendors.
Yeah, join my board of advisors and help give me advice. You seem to have a lot of experience. And so I did. And so again, about 3 years into my business, we were just having a lunch to kind of catch up. And he said, well, I'd listened to a lot of what was new with his company, great things happening. And he said, well, what's new with you? You're doing this speaking thing. You're out at a lot of events. I see you speaking everywhere. What are you seeing? What's new? What's next? And I said, I've been thinking that I, at the time, was speaking at probably 50, 60 events a year. Um, and those were all over, a lot of different states, maybe a couple international. I said, I see at these events a lot of the same speakers, which is great if you're inviting me because I want to be at all of them.
Hmm.
But I also hear a lot of the same topics, especially anyone who's in human resources. You got to get the lawyer who tells you what you can't do. You got to get somebody talking about compliance. You got to get somebody talking about, there are a lot of the same topics. Let me pause there. I always do. I want to say that's no criticism of any conference or event or any HR conference or event, because most people go to one conference, not 50 or 60. So the fact that,
You have to repeat it.
well,
Yes.
the fact that the same people are speaking, you see that criticism on LinkedIn sometimes. Why are these conferences having all the same speakers? Because they know those people will do a good job, people.
Yeah.
And the person in their audience who goes to one conference wants to hear somebody who's going to do a good job. Yes, they need to filter in some people who are new as well, new voices. I agree. And HR conferences and speakers, people are looking for those professional development credits. That's why
Hmm.
they come. So the conference organizers need to give them that, similar programming to get that. But I told Chris Ostich is his name. I said, I see a lot of the same people. Again, no criticism. What I feel though is that there are people out there with ideas that need to be heard, that either don't want to go through the call for speakers process, which in some instances can be way too complicated, what they're asking for, don't want to pay their own way to start building a brand as a speaker, don't want to speak on a big conference stage, maybe ever. They just have an idea they'd like to share, or maybe they would like to try speaking. And there's really not a lot of good options out there for them to do that because, again, conferences have a responsibility to put on a good event with vetted speakers. And so
Hmm.
they require videos and they require prior evaluations. And they want to know that you've spoken on 10 other stages that before they put you on theirs.
I can't believe what you've gone through to become a speaker. Just to pause, everybody thinks they can just become a consultant.
They do. Me
And
too.
but look at what you had to go through. Those
Well,
application processes, that's no joke.
I think to have longevity, a lot of people think they can do it and then they try it and maybe they get frustrated or they're not getting traction. And that is because they aren't figuring out that it is a long game, that number one, anything worth doing probably requires some investment, whether that's your investment of time, your investment of cuts, scrapes, and bruises, your investment of probably money. My
Mm.
advice to anybody wanting to start their own business is it'd be great if you had a year or two of salary in the bank so that you're not desperate, so that you
Mhm.
can do what you need to do, pay your own way sometimes to do things if you want to be a speaker. um, so that for me was what I was seeing was I don't know why nobody really talked to me about it, but I just felt like there were people out there that needed to be heard.
Mhm.
Thankfully, again, some of the nuggets that people maybe want to take away. Remember, I talked about my transition time where I talked to people, and then when I started my own business and I didn't talk to people, and I should have, having that conversation with someone, Chris Ostich, again, my business partner, who is very entrepreneurial, very startup minded. He's since founded, that's why we don't ever see each other. He's founded and started 6 or 7 companies since he,
Good for him.
co-founded HR with me. It's who he is, it's how he's wired. So when I shared that idea with him, if I had not shared that idea with him in particular, 15 years later, Jennifer McClure probably would be saying, I think someday it'd be great. I'm
But
not sure
he got you going.
I'm not sure I would have executed on the
Yeah.
idea because I would have been busy doing my own thing. he got excited about the idea, and he actually, left our lunch meeting and he called me, a few days later, and he had a small team in his little startup. And he said, Jennifer, I've been thinking about this. I think we should do this. I'd love to help you make it a thing. My team can do the logistics. He said it would be great for us to get, at the time his company was called Black Book HR, in front of the type of people that would be at that event.
Mm.
We both know a lot of cool people. We'll have it downtown Cincinnati at an old historic brewery that's just been restored. There's ping pong tables and cornhole games and beer, and we'll just have fun, and we'll invite people that we know that can he was a community organizer for Ignite events at the time for Cincinnati, which if
Oh.
anybody's familiar with ignite.io, that's actually where we got the 5-minute, 20 slide, 15-second format from. We stole that from Ignite.
Oh,
But
wow.
he said, why don't we use the Ignite format? Kind of that same, Ignite talks for people from the community that can get up and share an idea. And he said, we'll, for the first event, invite some of the people that we know that are cool, that will, aren't necessarily speaking at conferences and events, but have something to say. We'll give people free beer. We'll let them talk on stage like they talk at work if they want to. They can use 4-letter words, and it'll be different. We won't have, if you go to HR association meetings or any association meeting, there's got to be a sponsor, and that sponsor for their dollars needs time to stand up and bore everybody to death for 20 minutes.
Yes.
He's like, we won't do that. There'll be no pitching or selling at a Disrupt HR event. And he said, let's do this. And so that's how it started. I think, again, I've had trouble over the years taking any credit or associating Disrupt HR with me, but I will say, yes, the original idea came from my brain. It may never have gone out into the wild and been implemented without Chris Ostowich. So he will always be the co-founder of Disrupt HR. Even if I never see him again, I still send him a tax return every year and go, this is how much you owe. of the pennies that we took in, because we didn't think about it as a business when we started it, and we didn't think about how we could turn this into something profitable. And it is 100% a labor of love. Yes, I get a few pennies, but it is not my day job. It's all really volunteer efforts and encouragement of others to disrupt, to hold events, to give talks. We just celebrated our 11-year anniversary, December 13th of 2024. So we started on December 13th, 2013. Never thought it would be anything more than just doing it in Cincinnati with our friends and having fun. But it's grown now. I did the stats yesterday because we had our last event of the year a couple of weeks ago. 8,892 videos of talks out there online in 11 years. 821 events have been held around the world. 166 cities and 33 countries are currently licensed to hold Disrupt HR events. So I'm
That's
pretty proud.
it's
But
insane.
I'm excited that, you and I have talked. I had another conversation with someone else this week who, in many ways, we've some of our cities have expanded. They want to be mini TEDx's or whatever, and so they require now people to go through a complicated speaking application process, which hurts my heart. But we don't have a lot of rules, so I can't tell them they're doing it wrong. But I saw a post on LinkedIn yesterday where someone shared their video from a recent event, and their whole LinkedIn post was about how they had always wanted to challenge themselves to speak on a stage, and Disrupt HR provided them that opportunity to do so. And they were very proud of their talk and their idea. She thought she had messed up, while she was in the talk. She missed the timing of her slides. She thought it was a disaster. But when she watched back the video, she realized it wasn't that big of a deal. She wanted to encourage everyone else to chat. I'm like, this is why. It's
It's
why we started it.
it's what it does. It really is. I mean, as a former speaker, I remember our chapter leader, Alina, reaching out to me and saying, I feel like you might be interested in this. Take a read. Here's an application.
Love it.
And I think I read it and put it away and read it and put it away. And then I thought, I'm just going to do it. And in 5 minutes, I just submitted the application and hit send before I could change my mind. And it gave so much to me. So fast forward to us starting Rippled Radio. I really feel like participating in Disrupt HR was the match that got struck because it gave me this outlet to say what I think is relevant to other people. And I'm okay at it. And it gave me some friends that were supporting me, including Jess, who's recording this right now, who's kind of like my Chris. Like, we would not be doing this if it wasn't for her. And so I wanted to interview you because to me, you're like the OG Rippler now in terms of the first thing that happened that set off a chain of events that brought us here today, which is such a cool full circle moment.
I love it. I
So
love it. I mean,
you're so humble and you think, oh, I just had this idea, but Chris did it. You had the idea 11 years ago that's making us sit here today.
yeah.
And think of how
Well,
big that circle is and how many other people are doing something because of their talk.
Well, I hear from some of them sometimes, and I've shared with you and others. I've done a poor job, and I say that, and then I still don't do it. Of like cataloging the stories that I do hear from people, of people who met their business partner for the new business that they started, or who now are professional speakers because their first opportunity was given to them on a Disrupt HR stage, or someone who is now in a different career because of what they heard or who they met at a Disrupt HR event. There are plenty of those stories out there, and I'm super proud of all of those people, and that's what gives me joy. As I said, I think maybe that's a little bit of maybe my internal wiring is I want to help you succeed and inspire you to do something new. As a speaker, you always get, if you're on the plane with somebody, which I've got my headphones on, so don't talk to me.
The
The
ultimate do
example,
not disturb.
I still wear headphones with cords on them
Quartz?
for that reason, because I want you to see them. But the example is, if you're on a plane and somebody asks you what to do, well, whatever, on a plane at a networking event, and you say I'm a professional speaker, and they're all, 10% of people will maybe get that, or they'll have some further questions, and then like 90% of people are like, oh, so you're like a motivational speaker like Tony Robbins? And I'm like, what? you know Yes, in a way. I'm trying to inspire you and motivate you,
Yeah.
but a lot of my audience are people professionals, HR recruiting, people who lead people, et cetera. And I'm really trying to get you to see what opportunity you have to truly impact your business in the world through helping the people that you have to grow and develop into who they can be as the best people or leaders in your organization. So, yes, in a way, I guess that's inspiring and motivating, but it's also tactical in the sense that I want to share with you stories about how it's worked for other people or not worked. So let's all learn from that. But I want you to leave when I'm talking, whether it's a half day workshop or, a 1 hour keynote, I want you to leave thinking, I can do this.
Mm.
Um, and that's what gets me excited, is seeing that light come on in other people, or hearing back from someone after an event who said, a couple of times, again, would have been great if I'd had, let me turn the camera on while you say that. Somebody come up to me, I'll never forget it. One of the national SHRM conferences, was in Chicago, I think 2018. And I had a mega session, and there were about 3,000 people in the room, huge, huge room. And afterwards, there's usually people that come up and they have a question, or, they want to follow up on something. So there's a little line. And I had a friend who was there supporting me, and after the line went down and it was just Mary and I in the room, there was one person who she had come up and sat on the front row, and she was still sitting there. And she walked over and she said, and this was on Monday, so the conference starts on Sunday. She said, I want you to know that I'm a VP of HR, and I am sick and disgusted about my career in HR, and I wanted out. But I told myself I would come to this conference and see if anything would help me change my mind that I needed to stay in this job because I can make a difference. And she said, your talk was what did that for me. And I'm like,
Done.
again, I don't want to make that about me, and I don't mean to sound falsely humble when I say that, but that is why I do what I do. And it's happened, and again, it was the next year in Las Vegas. Again, big room, thousands of people. Woman waited till the very end, and she came out. She had tears in her eyes, and she said, she was older than me. I would assume she looked older.
You hope.
She had tears in her eyes. And again, I'm telling a tears in the eyes story, but she said, I want to be you when I grow up.
Oh,
And I was like, why? And she said, because you inspire me to do my best work. And I was like, again, then I'm crying. So does that happen every time? Does somebody come up? They don't come up and tell you that to your face. They do it on the anonymous comment forms. You were terrible.
right. So small segue about that, and then I need to come back to the tears. When I started out as a trainer, every Friday I would get paper evals of about me. And again, these sales reps got to write down what they thought of me. And every Friday I'd have to read 30 pages of how did Corey do this week?
Oh, and 90% of it was good, but you focused on the
Oh, it's
10%.
all I remember. I remember specifically, I don't really see the value in her, period. But you get thick skin. And I relate to so much of what you said. Like the competitive part of me is like, I'm never getting that again. And so I would just fight for everybody in that room to feel like they got something. And I'd love to say that was selfless, but clearly it wasn't entirely. It was kind of competitive too. But when you talk about your why and that win for you of that means I accomplished something, it makes sense. And I think about the rest of your career, like social media is funny. I feel like I got to know you without you knowing it. So I read your webpage and I read about Unbridled Talent. I read some of your blogs. I listened to your podcast, Impact Makers, which is another word for Ripplers. I mean, there's so much I relate to with you. So now you spend your time in these different places. Like, what's your favorite activity? The workshop, the speaking, the coaching, the one off? Like, what makes you the happiest now?
Oh, my favorite activity. And again, it's one of the reasons why I eventually did make the leap. I had a friend who was an executive coach. We weren't in a coaching relationship, but we were in an elevator when I was trying to make the decision, was struggling with the decision of leaving the recruiting firm to start my own business. And I always would, let me take a pause here and say, I waited a year and a half to start my own business, basically because I couldn't think of a business name. Which was the dumbest thing ever. Just call it ABC Corp, people. You can
But
always
no,
change
because
later.
you're a horse person and unbridled talent.
But again, that wasn't a year and a half. Maybe it was. Maybe I needed the lessons learned in a year and a half. But I remember we were in an elevator going up to my office at the recruiting firm, and we'd gone to lunch, and I'd kind of told him what I was struggling through, and he said, "Jennifer, when are you in a flow state? What is happening when you feel like you are just on and you could do this forever? Tell me what that looks like." Great executive coaching question, right? And it wasn't hard to come up with an answer. I said, when I'm standing on a stage doing Q&A,
Mm.
I feel like I am helping people to get answers to the questions that they need solved in order to do what they need to do. I like sharing with people what I've learned, and I like helping them to grow. And he said, then you should really think about doing that. That is, it's not necessarily the Q&A. Standing on, I think the keynotes for me are what I enjoy the most for a lot of reasons. I love to travel. I love to meet new people in different places because I love to hear all of their different perspectives on people and talent and what it takes to be a strategic leader in today's world. But those keynotes then will generate the LinkedIn messages afterwards, or again, the people who come up and stand in line who have questions, or the people that you see at another event 2 years later who say, I came to this event because I saw you speak 2 years ago. That helps me. It was important during the pandemic. If you remember the pandemic,
God, it's like a
let's
blur.
just let's go back to March of 2020 when Jennifer
Right.
McClure was set to have the biggest year of her speaking career. She was scheduled to go to Barbados and New
Oh,
Zealand and India, and already had booked several conferences and events, and was just really. It's funny. A Facebook memory post comes up from the last gig I did in February of 2020, where I was on the plane back, and I'm like, it was the best because it was a veterinary conference, and I was like, it was the best event where I felt like I had done the best job ever, and I'm like, 2020 is going to be amazing. Woo, it was. All of my businesses, both Disrupt HR and Unbridled Talent, went to zero. I think the first cancellation I got was like March the 7th. I canceled on India just because it felt like traveling through international
Felt like a
airport.
bad idea.
Bad idea, I think, shortly after that. And then by the end of March, everything was zero. And I'm questioning my life. Of course, we all thought it was going to be 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. But
Right.
I'm
Flatten the
like,
curve.
first of all, everybody was talking about disruption and pivoting and all that. I'm like, nobody's going to want to disrupt HR or anything ever again. So disrupt HR is going to die because we want to have
Oh.
live events. So we did pause all that. And I'm like, it won't come back. It'll be a thing of the past. So disrupt HR is dead. Jennifer, as a speaker, this has kicked me in the gut, because I did see a lot of speakers who were starting to do the virtual talks and who were actually doing really well. And many of them saying, I'm more helpful to people than I ever have been. And so I began to question myself because I'm like, I don't feel like I can help anybody right now. I don't know what my purpose is anymore because I'm not so busy out there. 2019 was thankfully a very busy year. I'm not out there doing what I love to do every day. Maybe, and I started again sitting here all alone because I'm self-employed. I started to think, was I just doing this for quote the applause, which people don't usually applaud at a HR
Oh.
conference? And I'm like, was I just doing, I don't think that's who I am. But if I'm sitting here in April and May and June of 2020 and I can't connect to my purpose and I can't get excited about, and again, my mother was having some health challenges. I had just moved. So I mean, there was a lot going on for everybody, including me. But I was getting so down in a spiral of I must have been doing this for the wrong reasons all along
Mm-hmm.
because I cannot reconnect to it now that I'm not in person on a stage or on a plane every week. And I interviewed for my podcast during that time. There's a gentleman here in Cincinnati, and his name's Todd Henry, and he's written a few, I believe, New York Times best-selling books. One's called Die Empty. Um, I think that was his first book, but he's got several, and he has a great podcast, The Daily Creative now. I listen to it all the time. Todd and I have spoken on some of the same stages, but I wouldn't, we haven't necessarily interacted. But I saw on social media that he was publishing his next book, and it was called The Motivation Code. He partnered with an organization, and there was an assessment. And of course, I love assessments, and so I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, Todd, I'd love to have you on my podcast to talk about the Motivation Code." And he's always been very generous with me. He might have been on my podcast twice now, but that was the second time. And he said, "Hey, before our interview, would you like for me to send you the assessment so that we could talk about it during the podcast?" And again, I'm like, yes, if there's a D word on it, I'm it.
I want to know.
Well, there are 21 motivation factors, I believe, from their research. And I don't remember my results. They're here on my desk, probably, or in my desk somewhere. But when we got on the podcast, or no, before we did the podcast recording and we're just chatting, and he was like, "How's it going? How are you doing with this? Everybody's moving to virtual and all that." And I said, "Todd, I'm really struggling. I'm doing some virtual, but it is 10 times harder for me. It's just, I'm staring at a green dot for an hour. It's not, I'm having trouble." And I said, I'm wondering if, maybe that's it for me because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And he said, "I've seen your motivation code results." And he said, "I can tell you why you're struggling." And I said, "Oh, please do. Free coaching. I love it. That's why you should have a podcast, free coaching."
Yes.
And he said, "Your number two," and I don't remember what my number one was. "Your number two motivating factor," and he said, "It's number one for me, is you want to make an impact." And he said, "Why you're struggling is because you're not seeing that the work that you're doing is having an impact. Because you're staring at a green dot for an hour
You
or
can't
two
see the
hours,
faces
you
and you don't
cannot
get the
see the,
line after.
and you don't get the people who come up afterward who tell you that what you have said impacted them in some way." And he said, "That's what's missing. So you need to find a way to reconnect with that." And I was like, that is great advice. I don't know how to do it, but and we did all work through it, but I think, yeah, that's how I'm wired. I want to make ripples. I want to have an impact. I, in some ways, view that as a little bit arrogant. So maybe that's why I try to
I want to pause on
with me.
that. This is the second time it's come up in 24 hours for me, so I feel like we have to talk about it.
Uh-huh.
You you just said I had this fear of it being arrogant, right? And you were so nervous that like your motivation was the applause. Now, it's not. It's so clear when you talk. But I was talking with somebody yesterday and said something along the lines of, I love helping other people, plus because I know it's selfless and no one will think anything else of it. And so it's freeing. Like this fear of being judged for being self-driven in some way. Like it's not the worst thing. We're both competitive people.
Yeah.
But that fear of that, I'm going to spin in a good way on that a little bit because I think it's okay to want to be good because it means we're effective and we're making an impact. And that's weird for me to say because I'm always running away from looking like I'm doing anything for myself. But we do have to do some things for ourselves too.
Sure. And if I were coaching someone, I always say, I'm a great coach for you. And I also can coach myself. I just don't listen
Take
to
my own
me.
advice.
It's like, and I'm a terrible client for a coach because I'm like, yeah, I knew that. I could have told you that, but I'm not going to do it.
I know.
But I think if I were coaching someone who maybe talked like you and I did, I would say, it is okay that those two things exist. I am self-driven, highly motivated, very competitive. As you said, I want to succeed and I've worked hard to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's where I think it's hard for, maybe it doesn't sound as good. I get more satisfaction helping you to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And that can sound arrogant because so many people just say that and they don't mean it. And, who am I to judge who those people are, I guess. But I truly get more internal joy from an interaction where you've had an aha moment or you have overcome something. Or again, all those executives I met in transition who no one had ever told them, look, I can see through you. You have a career wound that you're trying to cover with all this positive self-talk. This is a safe space. Let's figure out how you can overcome that. And then they send me a message where they got the job because they figured out what the problem was. I'm like, that's what success looks like to me. But it also looks like I want to speak all over the world and to impact as many people as I can and to share a message with people in the audience that resonates with them. I guess it is okay for those two things to coexist.
Well, Jennifer, I could talk to you for probably days. Um, but I feel like this is a good pause point for us. But I also feel like you might have to come back and visit the Ripplers again if you would do that.
To ripple with everyone again.
I would love it. So I want to close out with how we've been closing things out. Do you have a glass near you? A cup of anything?
You know what? I did. I left it in the kitchen, so we'll pretend.
We'll pretend. I'm gonna
Coke, I can assure you.
I'm gonna pretend it's okay. I'm gonna pretend with my water bottle too. Usually I have a little flute, but today I'm gonna use a water bottle. But we talk to people and they're listening because I think today people were listening because they want to know how to make an impact too, because that's what Ripplers do. So I want to toast you with my big water bottle and say thank you for being an inspiration to me and such a great Rippler, even before being a Rippler was a thing. And then together, maybe we can toast all the Ripplers, right? So here's to the Ripplers. Perfect.
Yes, with my lip gloss.
Love it. Love it. Jennifer, thank you so much.
1, 2, 3.